ChatGPT is writing this whole Python code for you. Once you're able to understand and read those, you will be so powerful because you have now like, your own domain knowledge and you have the technical understanding, and then ChatGPT actually execute it.
We break the barrier of using Python and you show people how to prompt to get the code. Then like people just say a new word opens. So welcome, Tobias. I'm really glad to have you here because you are an AI expert, but not a new AI expert. You have been using AI since a while. And you were last week in Belgrade doing a keynote. And I really want to ask you, what did you see there as AI tool or solution that really surprised you or inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, hey, first of all, thanks for being here, for hosting me. That's super cool. And yeah, last week, Belgrade conference, it was Data Science Europe. It's one of the largest AI data events. And it's been actually there for over 10 years. So, and for me, it was now the third time. It's really interesting to see kind of how AI has like taken over everything. At the beginning, it was very data and data science focused, but now everything is like AI. I was also there last year, and I must say last year, the focus on tools and technologies was even bigger than this year. Because this year I hardly saw like any big AI tool kind of like announcement. There was one keynote from Microsoft, and they kind of like made a promo for their like agentic things and so on. But I think like what lots of like companies and people have realized by now is that there's no easy plug and play solution for especially generative AI. Like there were lots of disappointments, also from Microsoft. Like anyone who has tried out Copilot knows what I'm talking about. But also from other vendors. So the product demos are always cool. The prototypes are also like amazing. But once you try to scale these things up, many people come to the realization that it takes a lot of work to make these things work. And if it takes a lot of work, then suddenly you don't really have that good business or ROI case anymore, because like now you have the AI tool plus, the people working together with it, and then it's much harder to make a compelling business case out of that. Yeah, so that was it basically. But generally, like, I mean, this like whole ecosystem is still buzzing. There are so many things happening. One big thing, for example, small language models was a big topic. So how to make LLMs more efficient and like also available on like consumer hardware and things like that. So I think this is really a super exciting area.
Okay, and on this specific part, small language models, do you see anything for corporate as well, like B2B, or is more B2C?
No, I do think that it's a B2B case as well, because at least for me and the customers that I work with, like normally the first entry point is ChatGPT or anything that is similar like that, Claude or so. And then, they try something out and they have some good use cases, for example, around data analysis or just general workflow improvement. And then they wonder, okay, how can we take this to the next level? So in order to like, not use ChatGPT all the time, but maybe integrate or automate that even further. And if you want to automate that even further and run it like at scale, then running at scale also means like, running at, higher costs. Because if you just have a ChatGPT subscription, that's what, $35 per user per month or so. But if you run that at scale, that means like you pay on consumption basis. So if you have your Azure or whatever LLM endpoint in your organization, you just pay, what's being used. And sometimes that can be a lot, especially if users like send their very long text prompt, to the AI, or for example, if it involves like very text-heavy document retrieval. And now with small language models, companies are better at a situation to host these models internally. And so they don't have any external dependency in terms of like costs or API providers. So they're completely independent. But also it's much easier to control the cost, because like what you need to invest at the beginning is like, some bucks for the GPU and then just run the model locally. But that's it. Like there won't be any big surprises. And that's what like I saw a lot of customers really like about that, because it gives them a lot of more like they can plan much better with that, because they know, okay, there you go, that's our investment and that's what it is, but it doesn't really scale up as the usage goes up too. So that's where I do see a big opportunity. And like with other like bigger language models, the infrastructure cost would be so high that you would need like a bundle of use cases in order to justify that investment. But now with small language models, yeah, actually, like, you can just host it on like almost on the hardware that you already have in your organization.
So that's actually for managers who are looking also at cost efficiency. That's a good alternative. If they see like those AI costs increasing and increasing, they can look into it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I would recommend. You know, if your AI costs start exploding, really try to evaluate if it makes sense to just move some of these things on premise. But to be fair, you have to have a certain AI maturity. You know, that's nothing that I would recommend anyone doing in the first couple of like weeks or months of their AI journey, because that comes with a complexity as well. Like you need to have people that can install the thing and like figure out how to like run and like maintain it. It's not like a plug and play solution. Like we're not there yet. But let's say for companies that are already maybe like 1 year or maybe even 2 years in their generative AI journey, I think now is a good time to evaluate the options. But don't start with that. Like, you know, start with the simple things, and then at the beginning, you maybe you pay some more fees for the hosting or the credits for the API. But you have more success with that.
So I want to look a bit behind in the past because we are talking about what was last week, really the new tools that were shown. You are almost like one of the only specialists that both was an expert before, but now even more because you really like took the wave and show us what is possible to do today. What was AI before ChatGPT? Can you explain a bit like your journey also and where was AI used before it was democratized with ChatGPT?
Yeah, yeah, sure. And so maybe just generally, the technological foundations are actually the same. Like it's still at the core, it's machine learning and deep learning, and we have done that before. But the interface to that is like now very much different because of the large language models. It's very easy to communicate with AI in like, you know, plain text language. Before we had supervised machine learning models, and actually maybe I can share one example so people can see, you know, what that is, and also I can say, you know, that's what we did back then, because this is actually something that I did myself back then when I was working as a data scientist. So let me quickly pull up that example here. So yeah, this is a use case which is like still super popular today, and a use case that I myself have worked in my corporate life back then when I was a senior data scientist and building my own machine learning models. And this is a customer churn prediction task. And it should be familiar to any business out there because every business has customers. And the big question is, okay, when do these customers kind of like, you know, stop doing business with you? And that's typically called customer churn. So they stop buying from you. And like, you know, about 10 years or so, we figured out that this is actually a pretty good machine learning problem. So you just can look at your historical customer records and customer data and figure out, okay, who quit when and what were the like demographics of these companies. And then you could like first do some like exploratory data analysis. For example, this one here, you know, this is an example from a telecommunication company. It's a very famous like, you know, exercise data set. So you can just like look that up online. It's like more proprietary, just like easy to, you know, understand the core concepts. So imagine you're a telco company and you have lots of, you know, customers that are subscribed to your services. And you can see, for example, here, you know, internet services. There are some people that have no internet services, that have a DSL line or fiber optic line. And then you see no and yes here on the right side. You can see that, for example, on the churn, right, on the right side, that people who have fiber optics are like relatively much higher likely to churn. Like if you just look at that distribution, you know, this red bar over here. And so now there's a signal for us to say, hey, you know, maybe people that have fiber optics are like more likely to churn. And now the big thing is it's not just one variable, but like, you know, a whole plethora of different variables and things that go on in your customer database and customer records. So what you can essentially understand this or picture this is something like this, right? You have a huge tabular data set, and this is like, you know, machine learning back then. Like you have huge tabular data sets. Every record here is one customer in that instance, and every column is one property of that customer. For example, you know, the gender, seniority, you know, whether they have multiple lines and so on. And then you just look at historic data and look who of these customers has churned. And then this will become the target that you optimize your AI, your machine learning model for. In the end, what you have is, you know, something like a score, you know, whether this customer, let's say this is a recent example of maybe your like 10 customers or 100 customers that are in your business right now. And then you get that score here at the end and say, oh, wow, this one here, this particular customer is really likely to churn, right? And this is all calculated by a machine learning model that has been trained to predict this outcome here, churn, yes or no, based on all that information that is given here, right? So, and what this website actually is doing, and again, this is just an example, is it provides you a real-time actually update. So you can now, for example, go ahead and change the values here. So for example, you see this customer is flagged, with 68% churn probability. But let's say, because this customer just joined like 1 month back. So what happens if, let's pretend it was not 1, but 10 months. And you will see that, churn probability decreased actually for that customer because like, the longer they stay, the more likely it is that they will stay and so on. And back in the days before machine learning, you would like kind of come up with these rule-based services or rule-based systems where you say, hey, if the customer is longer than 10 months and has this service and this amount, then probably it's like to stay. So, there was the rule-based world before. But now with machine learning, of course, we are in a much better position to make these really accurate predictions. And you can apply that in so many scenarios. This is churn forecasting, but you can also do that for time series forecasting, where you forecast a certain value into the future. Or let's say you have a different scenario where you want to predict whether a certain item in your manufacturing line meets the quality threshold or not. So there are tons of different examples. And this was actually, before ChatGPT came out, I would say like the bread and butter, task for every data scientist and AI people out there back then. Because of course you can make that much more complicated than this one, right? Like this is just tabular data, but you can use image data, you can use text data, and so on in order to predict the next outcome. Or to predict a future outcome. And this is actually how large language models happened, right? So instead of having a large table with customer records, you just have a large table of, essentially sentences. And what you want to predict is the next word in that sequence of sentences, right? So that's how large language models were born. And yeah, so this is what I did back then. I do feel that like today we kind of like forget this history of like machine learning because in the end that's still what's happening under the hood, and we forget that this is in the end about like pattern prediction from historical data in the regards, or in the special case of ChatGPT and large language models, large text data sets. But it's nothing that is really, I would say, like, cognate or philosophical or something like that. In the end, it's about like, pattern prediction at scale. And if something wasn't the training data, it is in the model, and then you can work with that. If not, then yeah, you will have a hard time doing that.
And I feel that since now we have access to those LLMs, building something like this before, like how many hours, how many, like what type of skills was required, what type of resource, and what is now that we have access to new LLM tools, if somebody like a finance manager want to build that.
Absolutely,
What was
yeah.
there before and after?
Yeah, this is a huge democratization. Like before, what I just showed you, you would need like a data scientist to do this, like, or an experienced data analyst, because it's quite technical to build that, to figure out which model is right and which model is not right. And in order to that, like, in order, for example, to build such a model, you would need to write code, like Python code or R code, in order to like predict these things. And now you can use actually AI to build these AI services for you. So let me just give you maybe another example here, which maybe fits pretty well into that picture. So, let's say, and this is just like me here being in ChatGPT. So what we could do now, let's say we also have, a very structured data set. In this case, and let me see if I can enlarge that a little bit here. This is a transactional data set coming from e-commerce transactions. So you see we have just, it's actually pretty small in terms of complexity. So you have a customer ID, you have your invoice number, invoice date, stock code, quantity, and units purchased. So, just a log of records in an e-com database. And this is actually, as you can see here, 91,000 records. So that is not a small data set. It's a pretty large data set that I just uploaded to ChatGPT. And now when ChatGPT, when I upload this, I can ask it, describe that data set. And as you can see, if you click here, what happens under the hood is that ChatGPT actually goes ahead and writes Python code for you, code that typically a data scientist would have written in order to figure out what's happening in this data set. And now that you have that, you can interact with that, like, and just use it as your personal data analyst or, junior data scientist, of course, like with all the caveats that come with working with large language models. But still, you can ask it things like, let's create a plot that shows how many % of my customers contribute, how much % to my sales, it's called a Pareto analysis. And then we'll go ahead and produce this plot here for you. And this is actually pretty amazing because if you take a look, at the code required for that, there's lots of things going on. But because the data set is pretty much structured here, it's just transactional data. It's actually really good at figuring out what's going on. And then I can interact with it and say, add another line, where the actual numbers are met. For example, 80% sales, how many customers are actually there, and one for 20%. And then you see this here in the plot, that, for example, you have 20% of customers contribute 67% to sales, and then 80% of sales are just driven by 332 customers. And this is something every manager can do by themselves. Like, you don't need to have a data scientist for that anymore. Of course, you need to verify the correctness of this, and like the higher your own level of data literacy, the easier this will become for you. But in the end, like, this is the big like democratization that's happening. And like, for me, the really like transformational part is that now you can like also interact with that data. Like, for example, you can ask a follow-up question and say, perform an RFM analysis, like frequency, monetary value on that, to see customers in each segment. And then it does that. And you can ask it, okay, explain to me what that means. Like, what actions should I take on each segment? And then it gives you these insights and says, well, these are your best customers. These are your loyal customers. These are the actions. These are your big spenders, offer personalized value services. I can go ahead and ask it, for example, well, visualize this as clusters. And, this is where it becomes really cool, where you can just like drive this whole visualization and see, okay, if you compare recency, frequency, and monetary, you have that cluster here at the top, for example, where people spend a lot and very frequently, for example, spend a lot and also with a high value. And then you can also ask it, like, what clusters do we see here? What should I do for each cluster? And you can see that on the right here, where it, for example, says you have this one here, cluster one, at risk, high spenders with a high recency. So they haven't purchased a long time, but moderate to high frequency, they used to buy often. So what you should do is like reactivate those with personalized win-back campaigns, offer discounts or limited promotions to reignite interest. And this is all stuff that you could do before, but before you would need to have like at least one data person doing that, like a data analyst or data scientist, and it would have taken you probably like a week for them to get back with the results. And now, like, I did literally this analysis just like, 10 minutes before we jumped on this call. So I think this is the main change that is happening right now. Yeah.
That's amazing because I've worked 15 years in finance. I've done a lot of data analysis, and each time I speak with people who is a data analysis background, they show me analysis that I thought, wow, why I was not using that before. And even though you just say like it only took you 10 minutes, I think what we hide with this is that it also took you 15 years to learn use cases on how to use data. And if we compare to a Michelin star chef, so you with data analysis, and somebody who is just starting cooking, and they have the same fridge, the same now tools, because you have also, they have ChatGPT, like a chef will have like the same stove. Like, how can somebody get really close to Michelin star use cases like you just did, like a Michelin star level, without having to spend 15 years? Now that you have also, everybody has the best tools. So everybody has the best Michelin star kitchen in their computer. What would you advise somebody to reach your level, what you just did, and what they should do now if they want to be as good as what you just showed us?
So I think the main realization for anyone should be that right now you have a much bigger leverage. So before, in order to do what I did here, again, like, you would need to like be a data person, or at least you would need to know how to write Python code. Right now, in order to like do exactly this analysis, you only need to do two things. First, you need to have a very good understanding of like your own business and what you're actually trying to solve, kind of like, what's the thing, because ChatGPT doesn't know, it doesn't have any idea about like your business. And also, even if you ask it about it, like, don't trust it too much. So like what kind of thing you need. For example, this e-com transaction example, you would know that, okay, I need to look into my customer base because if something is happening in my business or so. So you have that business knowledge. And then secondly, the barrier to kind of like quote unquote getting technical is now lower because ChatGPT is writing this whole Python code for you. The only thing you would now need to do is just to read through that code and see what happens. And it turns out that, if you take a Python beginner class and you spend maybe one day learning Python, after that, you're actually pretty well, like, because Python is a pretty straightforward language, you're actually pretty well equipped to just read what's going on. Maybe you're not able to like write it from scratch or write programming code from scratch, but if you see some Python code, you won't run away anymore and say, oh my God, this is code. I don't want to see that. It's similar like reading through a complex Excel formula, right? You might not be able to like reconstruct this formula from scratch, but if you just read through it and carefully, you know what's going on. This is actually the same competence that you would need here in order to have this workflow working for you. Because again, in the end, you need to kind of verify and see and understand what's going on. Don't just trust the results that ChatGPT is giving you, but try to challenge it critically and take a look at the code. And again, each snippet that ChatGPT produced here is maybe like 15 or 20 lines of code. It's not like, churning out hundreds or thousands of lines. It's just like chunks of 12 to 20 lines of code. And once you're able to understand and read those, you will be so powerful because you have now like, your own domain knowledge and you have the technical understanding, and then ChatGPT actually executor. So then you kind of like, skip the middleman, the data analyst in that case, to go back and forth, because the data analyst also does not know everything. Like, they come back with something to you, you challenge that, you get back to them. So it's that back and forth interaction. And now you can have that with these models, at least to a certain degree, right? For example, if you just upload your messy Excel spreadsheet with like colored headings and merged cells and everything, it just wouldn't work. So this example, of course, was designed in a way that the data is easy for ChatGPT process. And it turns out that this is very often data that is pretty raw, that is exported, for example, from some kind of source system. It's not data that we as humans think, oh, that's easy to look at because, I have this colored table with all the different heading levels and so on. So it turns out that data, which is very often like easy for us as humans to like analyze or make sense of, very hard for ChatGPT to make sense of that, and vice versa. As you saw, this data set with just 4 or 5 columns and 90,000 rows, every human would just walk away and scream and say, "Oh my God, what's that? Can't make any sense of that." But for an AI, it's actually just the format it needs, and this is kind of like part of the learning process that everyone should have. So yeah, short answer to that question, how to get to that Michelin star level. Like double down on your like business understanding, your business domain, and then like embrace technicality to a certain degree, as for example, you embrace Excel formulas in a way that you are able to, especially are able to read Python code, because Python code is kind of like the glue of modern AI programming language. Everything is in Python, so being able to read that, that puts you like so far ahead.
It's interesting because you use some words that I usually use when we teach. We have a course with Christian Martinez, a live course, where we teach people how to use AI for finance with confidential data, and how to do also forecasting with AI. So it's called Advanced ChatGPT because it was like the advanced way of using ChatGPT for finance. And yes, we do show that the glue, like you said, is Python, but we break like the first 2 hours. We break the barrier of using Python, and it just takes 50 minutes to make people run the first time their code in Python in a Google Colab. And then like people are like, wow, I can do it. Yeah. And once you broke this barrier, once you broke it and you showed people how to prompt to get the code, then like people just say a new word opens in front of me.
Absolutely.
And what we do after that is, because now they are asking, okay, what can I do? And there is a lot of things that you can do, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So there is this curve of learning, and that's why I think if you want to get to Michelin star, you need to know about, okay, like what type of meal can I cook? What can I do with these ingredients? And then you will learn, because you have now these tools, you will learn how to cook it, because you will ask ChatGPT, okay, how can I cook? The same way that you can ask ChatGPT to cook, you can ask ChatGPT to code for you. And now you can do like Michelin star data analysis on your finance data or other type of data.
It's actually one of the prompts that I like to use a lot for like this data analysis. You can ask ChatGPT things like, what's noticeable in the data, or something like, where should I put my attention, or something like, which questions should I ask, and just define your background of who you are. And then ChatGPT will come up with these. For example, let's say you have never heard about the RFM analysis, but if you say, hey, I'm a sales department head, what kind of questions should I ask about this data? It will come up with that suggestion of saying, okay, run a customer segmentation analysis, because that's one of the essential things you could do with that data. So yeah, as you say, it's super helpful for that, and I completely agree that the level of entering, especially Python, is so much lower. I have the feeling that so many people are still locked in a way, locked in a world where coding equals that black screen and the blinking cursor, and it's super hard to make sense of it, and they didn't touch code for the past 20 years if they ever did. But right now, let's say it's really accessible, and people don't know actually how easy it is. So yeah.
Yeah, myself, I never learned coding, and I'm using it every week. Like, oh, I want to combine 100 Excel file in one.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do anything manual. I just go in Python with
Yeah.
ChatGPT, and it's in 10 seconds done. And I
Yeah.
think just this mini use case, it will save so many times to many finance teams or even other people. You are showing us that you are using a ChatGPT. Is it your favorite tool, or do you have what is your tool stack where you think, okay, for this use case I use this tool, for this use case I use another tool? What would you recommend to people?
So meanwhile, and again, this can change obviously because it changes too. But yeah, I'm kind of locked in that ChatGPT ecosystem, because it's the first tool that I use, and also most of the prompts and the GPTs that I've built are kind of optimized for ChatGPT. That being said, now there are two things that happen. The first thing is that OpenAI is continuously updating their model in ChatGPT. ChatGPT 4.0 inside ChatGPT is not the same 4.0 that you had 3 months ago. They're doing the update. So that means that your prompts, for example, will also start behaving differently. And that also means, okay, if you need to re-evaluate your prompts, if they run well in ChatGPT, you can also just evaluate them somewhere else. And then Claude, of course, is the second one that I like to use, especially for coding and creative tasks. I think Claude has a much better taste or style in terms of formulating the text. So yeah, that's where I like to use Claude, and also to, for example, generate visuals and stuff like that. That's where Claude really excels. So there's one big difference between those two tools, and a lot of people don't know that. So maybe just to wrap that up quickly. So ChatGPT can run and execute code. If you give it Python code, ChatGPT can run that and just, for example, do that data analysis. With Claude, though, it can't really do that. It can't run this data analysis the way ChatGPT can. I think they just launched one feature which is kind of similar, but the main thing about Claude is though that it can create what's called an artifact. So these are the renderings of HTML pages and stuff that that Claude writes. And it also involves, executing code to a certain degree, but it's more about visualizing things and rendering something as a website, for example, so you can then share this website or this result with others. Which I think these are two different streams of use cases that you can do with them, and both are super helpful. So yeah, in the end, I do end up using both of them, but probably 70% ChatGPT and then 30% Claude. Let's see the difference.
Actually, to illustrate what you said about Claude, last week we did a masterclass for the AI Finance Club where we showed how you can use AI, for example, to do dynamic dashboarding. If you have to build a business plan and you are a fractional CFO and you go to your clients, or if you are a CFO and you want to show it to the management. And we built something like this where, yeah, you can move how many stores you have, and then it will change the graph. You can change your gross margin. It was just basically showing how with AI you can build something like this, and it was just done in 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is
Was
so cool.
I just asked, oh, how can I do a dashboard? And then okay, and then I
Yeah.
made the second prompt. We're saying, okay, take all of these parameters like customer per
Yeah.
store, and it just build that. And this is amazing if you are a CFO and you want to have a live discussion with your management. And there is
Yeah.
no confidential data here; it's just fictional data.
Yeah. This is so cool. This is so cool. I can remember like back in my data science days when we were working with like also the BI team. Like there was like, for example, the marketing department. Let's say we had the BI and it was more about financial data. And now we had the marketing team saying, okay, we want our data in there as well. Now this whole process started, from data ingestion to like modeling finding the dashboards, discussing the metrics and so on. And it would like take forever, like, more than a year to kind of like, deploy the whole thing and make sure everything is there. Only to find out in the end that the insights or the metrics aren't really that meaningful. So what you can do now is just like do the short track version of that and like build that kind of dashboard by yourself really quickly, or with the help maybe of someone, and then figure out if it actually is as valuable as, for example, putting that into like your productive BI system, or whether you say, all right, okay, that's actually the only insight that I wanted to know, and like I can check back again next year, on that KPI, because that also happens. Like not every dashboard is visited every day. There are some metrics where you maybe just need like a yearly review of a certain API, or maybe a quality review or so, and it doesn't require you to like build that all out in your like enterprise BI dashboard stack with everything that comes with that. But yeah, that's a super cool example, and that wouldn't be possible in ChatGPT. Like you need Claude for that.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
And I'm sure OpenAI like is jealous and they will release something really similar where you
Yeah,
have like
probably.
React code to build that because
Yeah,
I think they have the capabilities to do that.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I wanted to jump on the consulting part of the business you are doing, and you share in your newsletter something that I think is very important is to have return on investment on all of the AI initiatives that you do, and like low-hanging fruit,
Mhm.
something that you can get fast. Do you have a concrete example of what you did recently with a client where you think more companies should do that?
I would love to have that, but the problem is it's in the end it's super specific. I mean, it boils down to chatbots. Like, I build a lot of chatbots for customer support. So for example, one of the most recent one that we did was for a big exhibition company, exhibitor support chatbot. So if you have a large exhibition and there's a exhibitor coming in, asks, okay, what kind of passes do I need? Like, what's the maximum loading capacity of that hall and so on. You can just ask that in that chatbot, which is super cool. But it's not that I would say, okay, you can just transfer that use case now and roll it out to different things. It's very similar to saying, hey, everyone should have a support agent now on their call center. So I don't really think that is the case, because in the end, you have to really think about like what's the business case behind that? Because it's very easy to build, a very low hanging fruit solution or a prototype up within ChatGPT. So that's, pretty easy. But if you roll that out, especially to customers, and you have customer-facing applications, then what you need is you need to have guardrails around that solution. So you need to have people who monitor what's being generated. You need to update that. You will figure out that your customers are actually completely different languages. No, I mean not languages in terms of like English, Spanish, German, and so on, but like just like the terminology that they use for describing what they want. And so you have to update the knowledge sources and the prompt, and so it's a continuous cycle. And very often then people say, okay, like now I need to have a person running these AI systems for me.
Yeah.
I could just have that person interact with the customer directly. That's cost me like half the money. So what's the point? And this is where you have to think about that, like really at the beginning. For example, in the exhibition industry example that I just talked about, we actually don't really have that many like queries or customers. Like for example, if you have a big exhibition that's with 1,000 exhibitors or so, so it's actually not that many customers, but the bottleneck here is that a lot of these inquiries are coming at the same time, like 3 days before the show starts. So, and this is where these chatbots will have like a huge impact, because otherwise the existing support staff would not be able to just to manage the workload. And also you can't just hire one for 2 days, because if you hire someone for 2 days, they wouldn't even know, what the answers are. So this gives you that level of flexibility of still having like excellent customer support, even though you have like much higher like peak volumes of inquiries coming in. And so that's where I say, you have to find a good business case for you, because in our case, the business case was like obvious. We had much higher customer response times, also much better quality, and the actual people that were normally handling the customer support, the project team, could now focus actually on the delivery of that project, that trade show, and not like answering for the fifth time where exhibitors can park on the venue. So that's the impact here. But yeah, I think it boils down to like figuring out what to do exactly. And this is like what I do nowadays, mostly with customers. We have they often customers approach me and say, hey, can we do this and this? Or, we have done this use case, it doesn't really work. What should we do? And then we typically put that on a roadmap and say, okay, like how could our first very easy implementation or increment of that look like? Very often in a highly augmented form, with higher human involvement, but then also, what's the roadmap of maybe 6 months, 12 months down the line? Where do we see this use case? Will it be more integrated? Will it be more automated? What kind of steps do we need in order to get there? And then build up that capability, both technically, but also like on the organizational side, how to make sure that your people are actually using that system correctly, and just like be with them on that journey. So it's not about what I see a lot of other people doing. I don't want to comment on that, but like lots of other people are just kind of implementing a AI solution, like throwing that over the fence and then move on to the next client. But it's actually, in my experience, especially with generative AI, it's a journey. It's not a destination. It's not like you buy something and then like, okay, you have that AI running 24/7 for you, like doing all the work. It's more about, okay, now we started, and then the work actually begins. So yeah, that's what I do.
And I'm curious because there are so many solutions about chatbot. Like, which one did you choose for this client?
Well, we used OpenAI in the end, like on Azure as an Azure deployment.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you with
GPT-4 as a
Python
model.
code and
Yeah. We use some frameworks for like delivering the chatbot. I have a stack for building these chatbots meanwhile, so it's not that difficult to ship them anymore. Yeah.
Awesome. And so in your newsletter, you also shared something really cool last week about visual thinking.
Yeah.
Break this down for us, for the viewers, and how to use AI and communicate, to think and communicate visually.
Yeah, sure. So just some quick background. So this newsletter was co-written with Valentin Magé. Valentin works for actually Ferrari in Italy. So he's like leading a project management team over there. And he triggered that idea, and then we worked together collaboratively on that. But let me quickly show you what that is, so we're all on the same page, just to give credits here where credits are due. So this is the newsletter that I wrote last week together with Valentin, and I think this is so powerful because it shows the capabilities of AI through a new lens, especially with large language models. So we all know that like ChatGPT can generate text. Some people also know it can generate code, but when it comes to generating images, a lot of people are approaching that from the right angle because they ask ChatGPT to literally create the image, which very often, doesn't really work so well. It works like with photographs and and some cartoons or so. But if you, for example, ask it to create a visual, like a flow chart or so, it fails. So how can we do that? And we came up with 3 examples that we shared here in this newsletter. So the first one is that we said, okay, this is the current situation, right? You're an automotive manufacturer, maybe who's transitioning to electric vehicle production, and you need to optimize the battery supply chain network across 2 continents, working with 3 major cell suppliers and managing 2 strategic module assembly locations. So what you would now do is, to sit down together with a team, and if you want to visualize that, like talk for hours and hours, how could that look like? What is dependency on which, and so on. So here are the steps that need to be taken. But now what you can do is you go just to ChatGPT in that case, and you just input all the things that you know about this process, maybe some documents that you have, if you are allowed to share that, of course, in ChatGPT, if you have a team or enterprise license, or just general descriptions of that. And then the keyword here is to say, create a mermaid graph. And mermaid is a markup language that can be used to create flowcharts and graphs. So in this case, ChatGPT, if you enter this one, will create a mermaid graph, which you can then put into a software which is called Mermaid Live. It's just like an online free tool. You can also run that locally if you want to just paste the code that ChatGPT generated, and then you get something like this out of there, right? And this is then essentially the image that was generated by Mermaid Live as a result of the code that ChatGPT generated for this. And this is super powerful because you can use that for so many different things. So in this case, we use that to generate this plot of the interdependencies, of this supply chain network. And again, like if you want to have a full breakdown of this, there will probably be the link in the show notes. You can all read that here in my in my newsletter, so I don't go too much into detail. But you can also use that, for example, for, we call that here a crisis response flow, so what should happen in process terms when a certain defect happens in a quality in a manufacturing line. So, there's any quality issue or so. So you have detection, then the quality management, production, and customer. So, and this gives you like, what should happen at which stage, and also, what happens here in emergency cases. Or also, and this is like one of the things that I actually enjoy most, if you have any creative text. And let me see if I can make this a little bigger here. If you have any creative text, you can just give that text to ChatGPT and ask it something like this, right? Create a reverse outline of this article or sales page or, customer letter or so, and show the results as a mermaid flowchart, which shows the logical flow of elements as well as cross-references and redundancies of topics using arrows. And then you just paste the content. And what you will get is like a visual breakdown of how the topics flow in your creative text. For example, this is a representation of the actual newsletter that I wrote here. So, it starts with the introduction, then why visual thinking matters, how AI enhances that. We give 3 examples, and then like everything is tied to the benefits of visual thinking, and then conclusion, getting started with picking your tool, starting small, and then building your library of that. And like this is where I say, okay, like this is a good flow of the newsletter. So, there is no real any redundancy. It's like a good flow. But very often when you take a look at your first draft, you will see it's actually a mess, right? You have all these interdependencies in there. So this visualization will help you to get clarity about actually what you want to tell. And if you look at this could also be a structure for a sales page or anything else, right? Because like it's essentially a headline, subheadline, subheadline, then references to these. So it helps you to communicate effectively and really clearly, which especially nowadays, it's all about communication, right? So you have to communicate effectively, and I think this is where AI can be a great help. So
When I
and that's
see
what we
that,
shared there.
I think about a lot of use cases for finance teams. For example, how to represent your budget process.
Oh
If you
yeah.
have internal controls, how to show the flow of like from the beginning to the end. If you have to go into your board and you want to explain, maybe like an investment decision. Like it's financial storytelling. Is tell a story through images. Because I don't know if you are aware that our brain processes the images 60,000 times faster than text.
Wow. There you
This is
go.
why you should use more images than words, and that's why in magazines you have first image before words. And like this is a big example that you can, because not everybody is really good with visual, but you don't have to
Yeah,
be good.
absolutely.
You can use this.
Yeah. And it's so easy. It's right there, right? And the big mindset shift, I think that most people just have to do is just don't ask ChatGPT or whatever, directly for the image, except for Claude, because Claude has this rendering of the artifacts. It actually does that pretty well. But in most cases, especially in ChatGPT, just ask it to generate, in this case, like the mermaid code or mermaid flowchart, and you can just put that over. And also then if you have the code in the mermaid, and again, like more details are in the newsletter, you can also customize the colors and the fonts and the font size. So you can play around with that and just make it look really nice. But the overall structure is already there. And again, no design skills needed.
So I want to now speak about like the new buzzword, which we talked about a lot about ChatGPT in 2023. In 24, it was more like AI everywhere.
Mhm.
But now I hear everywhere AI agents.
Oh, yeah.
So what is your take on that? And also like if there is one AI agent that you have seen that is really working, like which one do you like or do you recommend?
Actually, let me put up a graphic for this so it's easier to explain. All right, there you go. Can we see that? Yeah, it looks good. Okay, so first of all, what are AI agents? And I think this is like important to just get your head around that. So if you build any AI solution, especially with generative AI, but it doesn't matter for any AI solution, like there are basically 2 dimensions, of complexity that you can drive. The first one is integration, like how much is that tool integrated and how much is that tool automated? That's the x-axis here. And it all basically starts here with ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is not really integrated in your system environment. It doesn't know anything about your background, your context. It just starts plain, right? It's not integrated. No, it's also not automated. So automated in a way that if you don't do anything, it also does not do anything, right? There's no automated trigger happening.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening. And now agents is kind of the opposite extreme. So with an agentic solution, you have a large language model that is like deeply integrated somewhere. So for example, something integrated like Microsoft Copilot into your like system environments. But it's also highly automated. That means instead of, Copilot, which would be a Copilot here, it's integrated, but it doesn't do anything by itself. It's kind of like, processing stuff automatically. For example, if you give it a request to do a customer reset, if a customer asks a chatbot if they forgot their password or so, then this agent would go now and then trigger all the systems internally because it's integrated, but it would automatically ask for the systems to send a password reset email for that customer and so on, and then just get this final thing delivered. And of course, like these highly integrated, highly automated use cases are the ones where most like value is potentially, because if you have something that just runs 24/7 and does all the work for you, then you can just like, go to the beach and sip margaritas and that's it. But very often it doesn't work out. That's my experience. Very often it does not work out. So companies start with these like super high agentic solutions. We want to have that sales bot, that chat bot that is like also doing the handling of the whole customer request, not only answering questions, but also like doing refunding and setting out password resets and so on. And then they realize, okay, it works like in 80% of the cases, but in 20% it does not work. And also they can't get it to work for the remaining 20%. So what we do is they like go backwards. So either they decrease the amount of automation or they decrease the amount of integration. And then they realize, okay, still this doesn't really work perfectly. And then they decrease the next one and they end up with an assistant where they say, oh, wow, now we have something where there needs to be human in the loop all the time. And, it doesn't really run automatically. And the whole business case is kind of like just gone, right? So that's why I typically say just start from the other angle and say start with an assistant and then try to integrate that and automate that even further. Because all of the agents that I have seen working actually have a very, very low degree of AI components involved. And this is, kind of just a renaming or rebranding of things that have been there before. Either it was called robotic process automation or it was called something else, just like automation in digital processes. But now, these are then coined with agents. But if you take a look at what actually is the AI doing in that, the proportion is really, really low. And in fact, I was like one of the last conferences I met someone from San Francisco who is like running one of the biggest like, agentic AI software companies over there. And I asked him over a coffee, like, tell me how much percent actually, of your agentic AI solutions, which is like used by like big enterprises all around the globe, how much percent is actually driven by large language models or like core AI? And he said, to be honest, 5 to 10%. The rest is just like rule-based automations. So, and if you like to call you rule-based automations agents for whatever sake, go ahead with it, it's fine. But don't start with the expectations that you have an AI service doing all the like, work for you and then like figuring stuff out for you. In most cases, it's not work. The way I see it, it's currently a huge marketing show that is supposed to bring in the next round of capital for these big AI labs. But that's just my personal take. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I see it. Because we see that we have reached a certain limit, especially with generative AI and the ChatGPT and stuff. Like these models are not really getting that much better. So, but the money needs to be pouring because it's like hell of expensive to run these models. So how do you make the money pour? Well, you have to take and tell a news story, right? And now if you take a look at like Google and Microsoft, but also OpenAI, OpenAI is like supposed to release their own agentic framework soon. Yeah, they all want to bring in money. And that's my takeaway for this, because I really haven't seen these agentic solutions with a large AI proportion work in practice so far. And I don't see them working anytime soon because of all the limitations that LLMs have. So mostly it will be just like rule-based automation, but the LLM part will be really, really, really low in these agents.
Yeah, I think also is about the people expressing their needs. A lot of time, AI is like hiding because it's easier for human to say AI than, oh,
Yeah.
I need at this step to automate. At this step, I need a bit of intelligence to understand what means this word. And then at this step, I just need to apply a formula. Like this is too complicated for humans. They say, oh, I need an AI to figure that out.
Yeah.
And this obviously cannot work because the technology cannot do that. But it's a dream, I think, as humans we have. But I think if you start asking people, okay, like what is exactly that you want to solve? Like you said, like you figure out that 80%, 90% anyway can be done with automation or by like just a good Excel formula or with a bit of Power Query and Python. And I think AI maybe has, on the positive note, has brought back the opportunity to humans and professionals to rethink that they should automate more, because now the coding part, the thinking part is easier to do than before. And I think also management now have more money to invest in this compared to before. Because like there was, I think like 10, 15 years ago, like the digitalization wave where there was a lot of money poured in and a lot of finance transformation project or digital transformation project that were maybe not at the end as successful as they were promising. And now like we are back into this cycle where a lot of promises, a lot of money back. And I think it's an opportunity to finish the projects from before using the automation. But yeah, like there is a lot of promises where because of, I think, lack of understanding of what it can do and what it cannot do, I think a lot of projects are not going to be successful because they have just the promises that cannot fit what the technology can do.
Yeah. And I think there are two different ways to tackle AI. The first one is personal productivity. Let's talk about generative AI, right? Generative AI. So the first one is personal productivity. Just use the tool like to make yourself like more productive, even in corporate enterprises. And then the second one is, something that like impacts the productivity of more than one person. You can call it a use case or a project. Honestly, I really haven't come up with a perfect name for that yet, but like, more than just personal productivity. And the mistake that I often see is that companies get trapped in one of the other. So either they just see generative AI just as a personal productivity tool, give some training, but they ignore the higher level picture. Or they say, oh, wow, it's so much more than personal productivity. Let's hold everyone back from using it until we figured out where to use it exactly. And I think you can go both ways at the same time. At the one time, you can empower your employees to work with generative AI like more responsibly and use it for the right things in their own daily work, like writing better emails or doing these data analyses that I just showed you, or like doing whatever. And the other part is then at the same time figuring out, okay, where can we actually bring that more into our core processes, or like figure out that we have a higher business impact in total. Because once you have then figured that out, you already have the hopefully employees that are now more experienced working with that technology, and also have a better understanding of what it can do and can't do. Because especially figuring out what generative AI can and can't do, at least for me, like I've been singing that song for the past 2 years actually now, but still today it's very hard to communicate what it can and can't do. It's super hard because there are lots of examples where people say, oh, you see, it was right, or where they see, oh, you see, it was wrong. And I feel like, always saying the same story of, how these things work and so on. But in the end, my experience is people need to have hands-on experience to really wrap their head around that. It's nothing where you just, okay, you watch a 5-minute YouTube video and then, oh my God, yeah, that's it, right? And then they are like, okay, now I know what to do. It's not as straightforward like that. Also because the technologies are evolving and like you get more and more capabilities. Like, for example, this screen, what was it called?
Computer use.
Yeah, computer use by Anthropic, where people just suddenly say, oh my God, it can control my computer now, right? And in the end, okay, like, let's sort it out. What's actually happening here behind the scenes? So things like that. And then this is why I think you need to, as an organization, like go both ways, like empower your people, your employees to have like to let them use generative AI tools, because they won't go away, like and they are driving massive productivity improvements. I mean, massive in the scale of like 15-20%, which is in my opinion massive. So you should use that, and like people are probably using that anyway with their own subscriptions. They don't get anything from you. And then the other part is at the same time trying to figure out, okay, where can we use that more like strategically or with a higher leverage for the entire organization, by just showing what I showed you, by getting more into the higher integration or higher automation workflows. And how do we get there actually? Like, don't start with these super highly integrated and super highly automated things right from day one, but try to say, okay, if that is the future, if this is what could happen in 12 months or so from now, how do we get there? Like, what are the different steps that we need to take in between, and how to make sure that our like employees are also part of that journey and like get more experience while working with these tools. And very often this also involves like focusing on certain departments or certain process types in your organization where you say, okay, this is where we see the highest opportunity for that, like sales and marketing or finance or whatever. It's like very hard to try to like boil the ocean, you know, if you do it everywhere in your organization at the same time and you don't have any kind of like coherent structure around that where you say, okay, this is the core thing that we're looking at actually.
I think that's a good way to also to finalize this moment together, because I really want that we talk about teaching AI to organizations, and I think you covered that well, and also where to start. Maybe last questions, more focused for CFOs and finance teams. Where either like have you seen where are good use cases, or where do you think finance teams should focus more their AI and generative AI use, either individuals working in finance or maybe teams, but I would say like something feasible and where you don't need to hire a consultant for 6 months or hire a data scientist team?
So I would say for individuals, just level up your Excel game because like lots of finance people I've seen there, they're just like, you know, it's all about Excel in the end. And there's so much time spent and also wasted on like doing things with Excel. And if you figure out how to like bring Excel data into ChatGPT and do stuff with that in there, and B, how to have ChatGPT let you write, for example, Python code that you can then apply in Excel, or for example, on Excel files, like, you know, integrating different spreadsheets or comparing different spreadsheets using code that the LLM has generated. If you crack that kind of like, you know, intersection of AI, Python, and Excel, I think this will like, you know, get your own productivity to the new heights. And otherwise, when it comes to like more classical AI use cases, then of course, like we still have forecasting as a major topic that is still not really exploited in most organizations. So, but this involves like, it involves more time because very often in order to get better forecasts, you need to add better data and more data, and you have to break up data silos so you can then actually use that information to make a better forecast. It's not about like just having the same spreadsheet and then like just finding a better model to predict your data. It's much often more about like, you know, bringing more data in, and this very like lots of organizations takes a lot of time. Which doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It's just like, you know, yeah, don't expect immediate returns on that. But for the personal productivity one, man, there's no way you should not do that by today. Well, it's my opinion.
Good. Well, I guess we should do another part about maybe focus on forecasting for finance. Thank you a lot.
Absolutely.
Yes. Where can people find out about you?
Yeah,
And
thank
which
you.
links
So
should I add in the notes? So tell me what I should add.
yeah, thank you. So yeah, feel free to add me on LinkedIn, to follow me on LinkedIn. So that's you know, where I post mostly, and also on my newsletter. That's tobiaszwingmann.com. So you'll find my weekly newsletter over there where I share insights around AI augmentation, and also with a special focus on use cases every Friday. So yeah, feel free to follow me there and subscribe to the newsletter.
Thank you. Well, go and check the links, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to get back also Tobias, because I think we will do another session about forecasting. Thank you a lot. Thank you for all of the insights. Thank you that you showed me everything you built, and good luck and continue to educate like this on LinkedIn, on your newsletters, and happy and looking forward to continue to working together.
Thank you. Likewise. See you.
Bye.